Good morning, students. Motion in one dimension or motion in a straight line already we have discussed. Our discussion is over regarding the motion in a straight line or motion in one dimension. Alright. In our last class we have discussed the calculus also, integration, differentiation, all the important tips regarding that, and hence we have derived the equation of motion also with the help of this calculus method. Graphical method also we have discussed, calculus method we have also done. Okay, now in our today's discussion we are to discuss in kinematics only motion in a plane. Our next discussion is the motion in a plane, right? In motion in a plane, that means in this we shall discuss two-dimensional, three-dimensional motion mainly in our syllabus. So in that, let us now start with first thing which we are to discuss, that is scalars and vectors. Scalars are those quantities which have the magnitude only. So scalars are the quantities which have the magnitude only, whereas the vectors are the quantities which are having the magnitude as well as the direction. If a quantity is having the magnitude as well as the direction, that is called a vector quantity. This is the difference between a scalar quantity and a vector quantity. Scalar quantity. In a scalar quantity, I just give you an example. Scalar quantity, we have speed, okay, temperature, current, okay, charge, right, distance, etc. These are such quantities which have only the magnitude. But vectors are the quantities which have the magnitude as well as the direction, like velocity, acceleration, okay, force. Mind this, force, but work done is a scalar. Force, right, etc. There are so many we shall discuss. The torque is also there, the moment of a force torque. These are quantities. Now, students, a question may arise. You may ask, current. I think most of you are familiar with current in a circuit, and you also know this, that the current in a circuit always flows in a specific direction. The current has always a specific direction for flow. It always flows from the positive terminal to negative terminal of the battery. That means it has a particular direction. Then you may definitely ask, then sir, why current is taken as the scalar quantity? Because it has a specific direction. Mind this, for having to become a vector quantity, a quantity should have the direction definitely. One more thing is there. It should also follow the laws of vector algebra. Laws of vector algebra में क्या क्या आता है? वेक्टर एडिशन हो सकता है, वेक्टर सब्ट्रैक्शन हो सकता है, ठीक है, वेक्टर मल्टीप्लिकेशन हो सकता है, हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे. तो इनको भी वो फॉलो करना चाहिए. करंट डज नॉट फॉलो द वेक्टर लॉज. Understood? This is why, in spite of that, it has a specific direction, it is considered as a scalar quantity. Right. This type of the small queries may occur in your mind, may grow in your mind, so it should be always discussed. Now, in this present chapter, we shall mainly focus regarding vectors. We have differentiated scalars and vectors, but our main discussion will be regarding the vectors. So now let us remove this scalar and let us come to only the vectors. Let us having the have the discussion for vectors. Vectors. There are different types of vectors. First of all, let us now discuss the different types of vectors. But before that, I just tell you here, a vector, it is always given by this here. This is the tail of the vector. This is the head of the vector. Moreover, any quantity, suppose A, this is A vector. I write A vector. Okay. And suppose any vector A is represented by this symbol. A vector means we put an overhead arrow like this. A vector. It is called A vector. Means I am saying A has its magnitude as well as the direction. But in mind this, I just tell you one thing here, my dear students. In NCERT, they have shown vector like this. Understood? What they have done, they have made it bold. Suppose A vector, here I am writing like this, they have written in this way. They have written A and they have made A bold. If A is made bold, that is, once you will check. This way NCERT has shown the vectors. So A vector is this. And if I want to show this is vector A, and if I say वेक्टर ए मॉडुलस, अगर मैं बताना चाहूँ कि वेक्टर ए का मुझे सिर्फ वैल्यू लेना है, देन व्हाट इज दिस? इसे क्या कहते हैं? इसका क्या सिंबल है? इसको कहते हैं मॉडुलस ऑफ ए वेक्टर, या इसको हम सिंपली ए भी लिख सकते हैं. अगर मैं सिंपली ए लिखूं या ए वेक्टर इन बिटवीन द टू वर्टिकल बार्स, दैट मीन्स इट शोज मॉडुलस. मॉडुलस मीन्स व्हाट? मैग्नीट्यूड, वैल्यू. मॉडुलस का मतलब होता है मैग्नीट्यूड, वैल्यू उसका ये होता है. होप यू गॉट दिस पॉइंट. ए वेक्टर मॉडुलस, मॉडुलस ऑफ ए वेक्टर, एंड दिस इज द सिंबल. As far as symbols are concerned, it is like this. Now we are coming to the types of vectors. Let us see the types of vectors. I enlist the different types of vectors first. Okay, so I first enlist here the different type of vectors. Different types of vectors. Number one is the, look, it is the position vector. I am starting with position vector. जैसे जैसे मैं बोलता चलूं तुम उसका डेफिनेशंस लिखते चलना साथ साथ. तो सपोज दिस इज अ प्लेन. It is the XY plane, and suppose this is the origin. Here is a point. It is P is a point. Here is A vector. Look, this is A vector. Then what is position vector? Position vector always indicates or specifies a point with respect to the origin. The vector which specifies or indicates the position of a point with respect to the origin, that is called the position vector. Number two is called the displacement vector. Displacement. Now we have the displacement vector. How to take? Suppose a particle is moved from one point to another point. Here, this is delta r vector. Alright, it is suppose delta. Take a minute, just a minute, students. If I write here r vector is the position vector, and here if a particle is moved from one point to another point, the vector which shows its displacement, which shows the displacement of the particle, the vector which indicates the displacement of the particle, that is called the displacement vector. Here delta r vector is the displacement vector. Okay, then let us see the next, some other vectors also. Let us see, some other vectors are also there. Number 3, equal vectors. Equal vectors. What are equal vectors? If the two vectors, look, if the two vectors are equal in magnitude and direction, are same in magnitude and direction, identical in magnitude and direction. So if the vectors are identical in magnitude and direction, then these vectors are called equal vectors. Number 4, unequal vectors. Next is the unequal vectors. One is the equal vectors, another is the unequal vectors. Unequal vectors means, look, just see, if I show you here, I hope you can understand. Unequal vectors means look at these three figures. If the two vectors either vary in direction, either vary in magnitude, or in direction, or in both. Understood? Here see, two vectors, A vector and B vector. What happens here? They have the different, here see, the two vectors have the different magnitudes. The length of the line is showing the magnitude. So they are varying in magnitude. Here they are varying in direction. Magnitude is the same, length of the lines is the same. So they are varying in direction, and here they are varying in both. They are called the unequal vectors. Then number 5, parallel vectors. Parallel vectors. Here A vector and B vector are parallel vectors, means the vectors which are parallel as well as in the same direction. They are parallel and in the same direction, they are called parallel vectors. And what is the anti-parallel vectors? Anti-parallel. What happens if A vector and B vector are parallel but in the opposite direction? They are called the anti-parallel vectors. Then number 7, if a number of vectors are lying in a particular plane, if a number of vectors lie on a particular plane, then these vectors are called the coplanar vectors. For example, here these all vectors are lying in the plane of the board. That's why they are called the coplanar vectors. Coplanar vectors. And 8, collinear vectors. If the two vectors are along the same line, like this, if the two vectors are along the same line, it may be like this also. Suppose I say C vector and D vector. क्या डिफरेंस है दोनों में? इसमें दोनों वेक्टर्स सेम डायरेक्शन में है, इसमें क्या हो रहा है? दोनों वेक्टर्स अपोजिट डायरेक्शन में. So in case of the collinear vectors, the vectors lie along the same line. If the vectors lie along the same line, they are known as the collinear vectors. Okay? Then next, okay, students, in the next lecture I will be continuing this.